Hello and welcome to the second part of our faction analysis and tier list video series. I'm again joined by Grotnib.
Hello everybody. If this is first video of ours that you stumble upon, please check out the first part so you know what we're doing here and why.
This time we are going to look over Ariadna, Haqqislam, and Nomad and all their sectorials. And next we have Ariadna.
And this one is bound to bring up some feelings in people.
Okay, what are your thoughts about vanilla Ariadna?
I think they are powerful and they are rightly thought of as one of the better factions in the game. But I also feel personally, and this is just my personal take, that they are a bit overvalued by many people and the current narrative of the game. And I would not place them in the highest echelons of factions in today's Infinity. What do you think about it?
Interesting. I would definitely place Ariadna in the like upper part of A tier, but let's first hear why you think they're not as great as people usually consider them to be.
Well, let's first acknowledge that they are a great faction in that they have access to some amazing individual pieces like the dreaded bear pods, Spetsnaz, good order generation abilities, excellent, or like the ability to form a diverse and deadly squad with all 50 models more or less participating, excellent skirmishers and infiltrators and so forth. But at the same time, the most dreaded pieces are pretty obvious, and there are counters to them that can be used to blunt their effectiveness quite considerably. And also the fact that in a game where hacking today is quite important, being a faction that effectively does not hack is a big deal, because not only does it mean that your opponent isn't going to have to suffer hacking into, for example, spotlight into guided attacks, especially since the Ariadna guided platform is so poor. Even their forward observers are weaker than others because of that. But also the opponent can use their own hackers really aggressively because they can adopt a aggressive deployment and an aggressive tactical posture because they don't have to fear getting hacked themselves. And that's something that then means that Ariadnans are going to get spotlit more than some other factions might be if the player opposing them knows what they're doing. And while many people seem to get quite triggered by camo spam, when you know how to play against multiple or large number of camo markers, it's not that bad. Especially in this season when everybody's using Tachimodos, it's really easy to censor stuff. And when you have an important Ariadna piece like Uxia or SAS or whatever under the camouflage marker, if you bring your FO remote next to it, sensor it on a 19, then it's automatically inside repeater range, spotlight it, missile it, it's done. And there's absolutely nothing that they can do to defend against that. So while they are extremely formidable on the offensive, they don't take a punch all that well, and the fact that their lack of hacking is so exploitable, I feel knocks them down the ladder a bit.
Yeah, there are some points that I agree with, but also some that I don't fully agree with. So the lack of hacking, I think, definitely prevents them from being in S tier. Uh, but they like if a player knows what they're doing with Ariadna, they can also be quite resistant against hacking. Like you mentioned, being bringing a sensor bot close to cow markers, censoring them and spotlighting and missiling them. Uh, if under the camo there is about 20 point SAS, it's going to take a lot of orders to kill that cow marker with a spotlight. First moving the bot there, then censoring it, then putting a spotlight on a missile. and each of those steps can also fail. And also, if the Ariadna player is good, it's not easy to know what's under the camos. In some cases, it can be, but if they play well, they can uh, pretty well hide what's under a specific camo marker. And
While I agree to that in theory, we do seem to see pretty uniform cookie cutter Ariadna lists. When you slap in the stuff that usually is there, there really isn't that many things to be surprised about. I feel there are several profiles in Ariadna that appear to be above the curve when it comes to their effectiveness, and it's a pretty sure bet that those are the ones that are going to be included. So yeah, it's true that it's order intensive, for example, to engage something like an SAS like that. But I think that's the cost of doing business when fighting these guys, and you can even either bite the bullet and do the work to get them, or you can roll over and cry that the bears are overpowered and Ariadna can be beaten. So that's the way I see it.
yeah, it might be the cost of doing business, but the cost is quite high, which makes Ariadna a pretty powerful faction, I think. And you mentioned that when you see the normal meta Ariadna list, you pretty much know what is there. Uh, but if we're evaluating the actual potential of vanilla Ariadna, we can't only consider the meta lists that we usually see. We need to also consider the lists that we could face if a good
Yeah, for sure, for
player does
sure.
something
But
inventive.
my point is that what's under there that could be worse than an SAS, basically,
Uh,
because I don't think that there are that many other profiles, for example, camouflage profiles, midfield camouflage profiles that are as scary as the SAS. There's a reason why people use them so much.
yeah, I think the point is that there isn't anything necessarily scary or scarier than SAS under them. But if you need at least 3 orders to kill one camo marker, the problem is that it might be even something less scary and less expensive than SAS that you waste 3 orders killing. And I think uh, like using a sensor bot spotlight and missile to kill one camo marker, if it's Uxia, I would be happy to do that. But in other cases, I really don't want to spend that many orders to just kill one camo marker that is about 20 points. And it also could be the Beast Hunter. It could be, well, a mine. Obviously, you don't need to then spotlight and missile the mine, but that's only one revealed mine with a sensor bot order. And also, if the Ariadne player is good, they can spread out their camos in a way that you can censor at maximum 2 camo markers with one order. Or then the sensor bot will get into a situation that it's destroyed by a mine or some kind of template weapon. And the I think also one strength of with Ariadna is that uh, you really don't. I mean, in some missions you can take deployment against Ariadna, but if they win the lieutenant role, you can't really deploy first and go second against Ariadna because their offensive is so strong. That makes them really strong in like area control missions like quadrant control and others like that. But they can still handle almost every mission pretty well, and they're really difficult to play against. And I think we haven't really seen the full potential of Ariadna uh, yet. Um, and just to give an example of like how to avoid hacking with Ariadna, the last time I played against Ariadna, and the opponent knew that I was playing Haqislam, and I do have good offensive hacking. Uh, they didn't even have unknown ranger in their list, which is the obvious target for spotlight and GML play. But instead they have like 2 bears and a lot of common markers, which made the hacking play against them a lot more difficult or inefficient.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong, but I still think that there is an opportunity cost that they are paying there, and there is an efficiency cost that they are paying there that people seem to disregard when they consider the strength of the faction. And when you're using something like a bear, even as powerful as it is a very resource intensive unit to use. It's going to have to get close to do the damage, and if you contest its advance, it's going to have to use smoke. Yeah, it's one of those units that's going to get there basically against most opponents. But even still, you can do stuff to lessen the blow, lessen the damage. There are stuff that you can do to make it more ineffective to use bears and so forth. So great, but not the boogeyman under the bed that people seem to take them as from where I stand.
Yeah, there are some parts that I agree with. Like, I think bears are not as overpowered as some people consider. Like, if you're playing against less experienced player, a bear will be really strong. But if you know how to defend against bears, basically like stacking a lot of medium range arrows that your opponent cannot shoot, but needs to like some way engage with bear, mainly throwing smoke. Uh, it's gonna make the bear a lot less efficient, and at some point the bear will start to like take hits, and it only needs to fail 3 saves uh, to die instantly.
Or 2 from a viral hit.
Yeah, and of course there are games where the bear just makes all the saves and it's impossible to kill, but it still has only like at maximum 10 orders. Usually you're taking orders away from that pool where the bear is, so it's gonna have 8 orders. And then if you kill a couple of models from that pool, it's probably going to have 8 orders the next turn if it's not dead. And if you have to spend order throwing smoke before engaging the opponent, that is definitely going to blunt the attack. And yeah, earlier you mentioned that there's usually nothing more terrifying than a SAS under a camo. I think that's like also a good point that usually people rely a lot on those camos with Ariadna. But yeah, I think you're right with your point that those camo models aren't that great at actually like doing stuff. So there are
Yeah,
nothing.
and you can the old wisdom among veteran players is that face checking camos is a viable tactic against Ariadna, and part of the reason why I rate sensor bots so highly against them is that if by advancing a sensor bot you are forcing some of the camouflage markers to react or whatever, or you can censor many of them, that takes away from their power. So there are things that you can do against them. So, but I think we are placing them in 8th here.
Yeah, let's place them in 8th here. I think they're ahead of Eugene. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, they're a bit different. I think their weaknesses are weaker, but their strengths are stronger. So we can place them ahead of Yuching.
Yeah, and also like one good way to play against camos, if you have access to Liberto, is just run Liberto across the table. The camos don't want to reveal themselves just to kill Liberto. Liberto will reveal all the mines. So if they're Chassers or they're Liberto, and usually Liberto is able to dodge or survive a mine. And then Liberto can even start just like discovering the Ariadna and camo markers at some point, and that's gonna be tricky for the Ariadna players because their camo markers are going to be more expensive than Liberto.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
and you are
That's also order intensive, and you risk losing a docket model to a shock mine. But yeah, that's also a thing that you can do.
yeah, but it's only an 8 point irregular model that you're sacrificing. We also said that we are going to talk about the Ariadna Beast Hunter. Do you briefly want to say a few words about that?
Well, that's a short story, really. I love the Beast Hunter, as most of us do, players who have access to it. The one thing that the one problem I have with the Beast Hunter is the fact that it's so unreliable. It's dangerous at everything that it does, but it's not consistently dangerous at anything. But the Ariadna Beast Hunter has a heavy pistol +1 burst. So that means that it is actually a rather okay, reliable shooter inside 8 inches, because you have burst 3, you're at good range, probably able to force the enemy or get the enemy out of cover, and you're basically forcing them to dodge in many cases because they don't want to eat the heavy flamethrower, so you can gun them down, something that's difficult for the standard Beast Hunter with its normal pistol. And you get to swing twice in melee, so you not only get the damage 14 burst 3 shock weapon that you can use to shoot, especially at close ranges, you also get that second all important second close combat attack. Yes, it's not explosive like the one on the Yuqing, but it's way more versatile because you are able to use it to shoot also. So that's why I rate the Ariadna Beast Hunter very highly.
Yeah, with other beast hunters to be consistently effective, you need to get into CC and then force your opponent to dodge because you have the heavy flamethrower, and then just CC them
Yeah, and even
against their
then you're
dodge.
only CC21, so it's not reliable even then.
Yeah,
So
or then just get enough models under a template that you're going to, or some of your opponents is going to miss their dodge. But okay,
yeah,
uh, yeah, the Ariadna Beast
I
Hunter
I
is
uh,
really good, and the
I think we should talk Cosmoflot next because they share a lot in common with Vanilla Ariadna. Is that okay with you?
yeah, let's go to Cosmoflot next. One last word about the Beast Hunter. Why it's also good in, especially in Ariadna, is that they have so many camos that you don't know which camo is the Beast Hunter is. It also gives more depth in the camo game.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, for sure.
bring more options what can be under the camo. But okay, let's go to Cosmoflot. What are your thoughts on them?
Well, they are. Uh, some people have called them the Ariadna All Stars. So there's that. They do have many of the better or even some of the best Ariadna pieces in there, and they can form some decent fire teams. But at the same time, they are a far narrower sectorial than Ariadna is, and then their camo game is significantly weaker. So for that reason, I'm willing to place them higher, but the Volkolak missile launcher or HMG in a fire team isn't going to prop them to Ariadna, vanilla Ariadna levels in my mind.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who calls them the Ariadna All Stars, which of course is strength. They have Unknown Ranger, they have Yuksha, they have the Bears, uh, they have almost every great unit that Ariadna has, and what they have, what Ariadna doesn't have, is of course the rocket link with Volkolak missile launcher, which is currently one of the best, I think, arrow models in the game because of missile and total immunity and 2 wounds. But being the Ariadna All Stars is also in a way a weakness to them because you usually know what you're up against when you're playing against Cosmoflot.
Yes, yes, exactly.
And like they don't have the depth that Vanilla Ariadna has. They can Vanilla Ariadna can have like different kind of really good list builds. Uh, but being the All Stars, they only have the All Star list, or then they have some like not nearly as good lists. And when you
Yeah.
know what you're up against in the game, it's a lot easier to deploy and play against them.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact that they have fewer tactical elements per list, effective tactical elements per list than Ariadna also hurts, because even though the aforementioned Volkolak plus Rokot's core is nice, once the Volkolak is done, it's basically a four model team that's not probably going to be that much danger in and of itself. So that's something you can write off. And an important note to what you said, Volkolax don't have 2 wounds. They have 1 wound and no wound incapacitation, which is very important because they go straight to dead after taking the 2 wounds, and you won't be paramedicing them back up, which is a really important thing. It also means that you won't be usually paramedicing them out of no wound incapacitation for the fear of killing the thing. So you actually don't get to bring them back. And I think that's a big weakness of the unit, in addition to it only being BS12. So while missile launchers are scary, and total immunity on a defensive piece is really annoying to deal with, they are only only BS15 in a pure fire team, and once they take 2 wounds, they are just gone.
Yeah, that's a good point. Though, like many people treat them as 2 wound models, which they kind of are, but the lack of ability to actually heal them after losing those 2 wounds can really hurt. Uh, Also, one thing that we didn't mention yet is the unknown ranger fire teams that they have. Like they can have unknown ranger with I think 2 Varangian guards with, and they have better Varangian guards than O12 because they're cheaper. Or they could take the patcher that has Vulcan shotgun +1 burst with a
Yeah,
link.
I
That's
think the patcher is really popular one there.
and also
But
really
like
strong.
you said, those are powerful pieces, really powerful pieces. But if a veteran player is facing Cosmoflot on a tournament, they can probably guess 14 out of the 15 models right, more or less,
Yeah,
by making the list in their head. And that makes, while the list is powerful, it is also predictable and easier to counter, because you can already think in your head, what am I going to do? How am I going to respond to this? How am I going to stop this? And where this is going to come from? So that makes playing against them a bit easier.
yeah, yeah. Like even though they lack the versatility, they do have the really strong Ariadna Alpha Strike, having the Bear Pod in Group 1 and having Yuksha in Group 2. But like you said, uh, you can know what you're up against. And the last time I played against Cosmoflot, uh, uh, I was playing Haqislam. I went second, and I reserved Liberto and Ghazi with a jammer. So Liberto blocked Yuxia, the Ghazi blocked the bear, and my opponent didn't really achieve anything in their first turn. They probably killed like 1 model.
Yeah,
So
I
so
feel I feel in general that's a danger of the cookie cutter lists, where there's this one more or less solved way of playing a faction, that they are predictable, and that makes playing against them and defending against them easier task.
yeah, but then again, like defending against bears is never easy, and not every faction has access to jammers or tools to really deal with those threats that Cosmoflot poses. So and that's why I would still comfortably place Cosmoflot in A tier, but
Yeah,
below Vanilla Ariadna. But I
yeah, but
think,
above Yu Ching, right?
yeah, I think above Eugene.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'd be more worried about facing Cosmoflot than Yu Ching in a tournament. But if I had survived the first turn against Cosmoflot uh, with reasonably intact force, I would be way more comfortable finishing a game against them and than against Yu Ching in the same same situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And like, even though I had the tools to play against Cosmoflot, I'm never gonna be happy
Yeah,
about
yeah,
facing Cosmoflot in a tournament.
yeah, yeah. That's true.
Uh, okay, then Caledonia. I think they're kind of like the little brother or little sister of Cosmoflot. They have they lack the versatility that Vanilla Ariadna has, but they have some really strong options as well. Like they can take, I think, 4 big dogs. I'm not 4, 3 big dogs. They have SAS. SAS is an Yuksha. Uh, is a faction where I think Wallace works really well. and they can have like also 4 Catarans if they want. They have some okay fire teams, which can shoot at least through some stuff, but basically their like attack vectors is going to be shooting things with maybe coordinated Catarans or then the Highlander Greys, or then like going forward with the dogs or SASs and Yuksha.
Yeah.
And I think with that, you're gonna have games where those attack threats work and you uh, more or less easily just overrun your opponent, and you're gonna face games where your opponent has good enough arrows with MSV that you can't really deal with.
Yeah, and they are also extremely hard countered by something like Doha.
Yeah,
So that they have such glaring weaknesses that they just can't seem to overcome in a realistic manner without handicapping themselves. So that works against them also. Also, this may be an unpopular opinion, but I have never been the biggest fan of Cameronians. While all dog warrior type units are good, um, Cameronians are the ones I like maybe the least because they have one fewer wounds than dog warriors because they start in dog form. They are a bit cheaper, yeah, but still, um, they aren't my favorite.
yeah, only APCC weapon as well. Uh,
Yeah,
but the good thing in Caledonia is that you can have 3 of those who can coordinate with the uh, Lieutenant Order of Wallace,
yeah,
which
yeah.
gives them
That's true.
some like additional power.
Yeah, and they do have grenades on physics 16, which I really like. So you can spec fire on a 13 when you get to the sweet spot. So I really like that. But yeah,
Yeah, but I think that like already sums up pretty well
yeah,
Caledonia. I don't think
yeah,
there's like much like important things that we haven't talked about. Like I think one actually thing that I might want to try with Caledonia is having the tractor mule with BS attack guided, and then having a lot of SASs, and then forcing the opponent to let the SASs either like going forward in camo or then discover them, and I could forward observe them and then fire some, well, not missiles, but some like
rockets or something.
some
But
rockets. Yeah, I don't know if that's really efficient or not, but that's one potential attack vector that they could have. But I think uh, they probably belong in the B tier, probably ahead of NCA, maybe below Varuna. What do you think?
really, okay. I was willing to put them top of C, but yeah, okay, that'll work.
Yeah, I think their strengths are like good enough to place them in B tier, and I think in most occasions they are going to be better than NCA. Uh, then next we have the French Ariadna, and I think as a bit of a background, I could say that just recently in our own Finnish that we had a tournament where all good players or more experienced players had to pick either C or D tier faction just to try out what we can like come up with them. And your pick was the French Ariadna, so I think you can take this one.
Yeah, it makes me sad because they are the obligatory free space at D tier. I really wanted to make them work. I spent some time building lists with them. I have played with them some. I can't say a lot, but some. And the general or the narrative seems to be that many of the OPP out of production yeah, out of production armies are like not loved and not cared for anymore, and they need some buffs. And I feel that this is a wrong narrative when it comes to many such factions, but I'm afraid it seems that they fit French like a glove. There just isn't. I just can't find it there. They do have some sappers, but faction identity of having average sapper units isn't really good enough. I like Briscards. Um, excuse my terrible pronunciation for any French-speaking listeners out there. There's something in those guys, but still, that's just a faction that just doesn't work. Uh, they have so glaring weaknesses. They just don't have the strings to cover them up. Mirage 5 are nice, but they are so easy to predict. This is really the faction that needs some type of dog warrior unit, and they don't have it besides them. So I'm sad for them. Hopefully, it would seem that the reinforcements mechanic is going to have them take more active part in the other Ariadna sectorials, and maybe that's the right place for them.
Yeah, I hope the reinforcement will lift them into C tier. But for now, I can't really say anything good about the French Ariadna. Like if you want to play Infinity there, in hard mode, you can do that with French Ariadna, but that's basically the
Or in
only.
legendary mode, I'd say.
Yeah, but that's really the only purpose I can think of for playing Ariadna. Like everything they have is at best mediocre.
Do you like excellent camouflage play? Do you like werewolves? Well, don't play this faction then, because we are Ariadna, but we ain't got none of that.
Yeah, I think they're like faction defining unit besides Equip Mirage are like chasseurs that are AVA 4, but even those are I think overrated. Like having a 20-point light flamethrower and a mine in midfield is not that great.
Yeah, I'm painfully aware, as primarily a Ramah Taskforce player, that the N4 did light flamethrower units dirty by making shotguns so great. So French guys are also one of the victims of that, I'm afraid. So on to USAriadna then.
Yeah, this is a faction that uh, I think is quite weak, somewhere in C tier, but they're obviously stronger than French Ariadna. Like they have some good units, like the Devil Dogs are great. Unknown Ranger is of course great. They don't have as good link options for Unknown Ranger as they do have in Cosmoflot. Uh, the Mavericks are pretty okay,
Yeah, I really like them.
but that starts to be it. Well, they have the Beast Hunter as well. You can like,
Infiltrating grunts are legendary by reputation, maybe not so much efficiency anymore.
yeah, because they still take up one of those 15 unit slots, and they are going to die
Yeah.
because they don't have the camo. Uh,
I
ma-
quite like the what's the HI unit they have? Blackjack with T2 sniper. That's a cool piece. Cool enough to be great. Mm, situationally good. Let's just put it that way. I like them. I T2 weapons are excellent because they put two wound models straight to unconscious and one wound model straight to dead in most cases, and having a somewhat durable platform that can fire at extreme ranges with high damage and T2 is really nice. So I like the blackjack sniper, but yeah.
yeah, the blackjacks are not great, but not terrible either. And yeah, they can be a bit dangerous to engage, but
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 that, that's so sad when when you pick one of the better units of the faction and go, yeah, they can be a bit dangerous to engage.
yeah, and they can of course create a Harris out of those. But then again, who are you gonna put into the Harris?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You can place them. Well, you don't want to place Unknown Ranger there, I guess. You can place the
So
Doctor
it's
there.
1-1-2s then. Or 1-1-2 and Rosie, or 1-1-2 and 2 blackjacks. Ah,
Yeah, I mean, you could take two blackjack T2 snipers, and your opponent would need to spend some amount of orders to destroy them.
or throw
Uh,
smoke.
yeah, it will cost orders, and like I said, engaging them could be dangerous. Uh, and yeah, USAriadna of course has Desperados as well, which are great.
Yeah, they are great, and they are, I feel, one of those units that disproportionately benefited from the change to being able to shed impetuous, because I feel that a cheap mimetism biker that gets to take cover can be a problem.
Yeah, especially with the assault pistol that they have.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I think vAriadna has some really good models, but like together as a faction, they are still not great. They have, of course, the obvious weaknesses that all Ariadna factions have, and they probably like the weaknesses for them are even worse. Like their camo game is way worse. Uh, they lack the bear pods. They lack Yuksha. I mean, the Devil Dogs are almost as good as bears. Probably. I haven't really played with or played against Devil Dogs.
They're good. Yeah, they're good. Not as good as bears, but they're good. Yeah, but not they don't get enough support here, I feel. So we're
Yeah,
thinking seat here then.
yeah, I
What
would place
part of
them.
seat here?
Yeah, I think in C tier. Would you rate them higher or lower than IS?
Lower, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I agree with that. Uh, but they're a really cool faction, so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I
they
hope
are.
they get some like buff from the reinforcements rule because with just a little bit help, I think they could be a solid B tier faction.
Yeah, for sure. They don't need a lot. They need something to tie the group together so that they can punch a bit above what they are right now.
Yeah. Then lastly, from Ariadna, we have Tartary Army Corps.
What's your take on Tartary?
Uh, also not strong.
Really?
I don't think they're very strong. Like they have Space Nuts, which is pretty good. They have linkable veteran Kazakhs, which are quite okay, although I think a bit too expensive for what they bring. They
And
have,
they also suffered quite immensely from the fire team update.
yeah, that's
The
also true.
veteran Kazakhs.
Yeah, uh, they have Carmen and Dog Warriors, which are all great. Uh, Ratnik,
Dynamos are excellent, I feel.
yeah, Ratnik is probably not as good as the Blackjack actually, because it's so much more expensive.
Yeah. I like Strelocks. Strelocks are nice.
Yeah, the camo game is nice.
And when used correctly, antipode packs are a pain to deal with when they are used in a defensive manner. I have had good opponents, great opponents use them to bubble wrap stuff like objectives, and forcing me to use orders to get rid of these guys is a pain. So they can be effective in a limited role.
Yeah, I think the weakness is that they don't have anything that is really great, and they do have the normal Ariadna weaknesses.
Well, I'd argue Carmen is great, but one great thing doesn't make a faction great. I agree to that.
Yeah, and it's like Carmen is great for her points, but not like a piece that can carry the whole faction.
Yeah. Hmm. This is a bit of a tough one because I do feel that um, TAC probably has more depth, and there probably is something there still that I, for one, don't understand. but at the same time, their merits aren't that great as of right now. Where would you want to place them?
I would place them like high C tier. I agree that there probably is some unrealized potential in Tuck, uh, but at least for me right now, it's a bit difficult to find out what would or what kind of a list and what kind of a like game style would make them really a B tier faction. So probably ahead of military orders.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Low B, high C. Yeah, then low C works, or high C works for me. So yeah,
Yes,
too bad. I
yeah,
think they are cool faction, and they have some potential. But yeah,
yeah. Do you think they are worse than NCA?
that really comes down to how poorly I know NCA. But maybe I'd say leave them as they are.
Yeah, I think we are now coming to the point that the differences are so small
Yeah,
and our
yeah,
knowledge about these factions are not super good that it's really hard
yeah,
to like arrange NCA and TUC.
yeah. I'm really happy that we're going to get soon to factions that at least I can have some more expertise on.
Yeah, so next we are going to Haqq So, Vanilla Haqqislam, I think, is definitely an A-tier faction. They're probably the faction that can have the most diversity in a single list. They have decent long-range shooting with Armand, Azrael, Knauf, or even Shakush. They have, of course, the impersonators. They have really affordable hacking and guided missile package with Barids or even the Mukhtar hacker. For close assault, they have, for example, Zuleika or Liberto. And if you want some more like durable gunfighting plus specialists, they have also access to excellent duos with Asaviras, Namurs, and Mukhtars, uh, and which can form duos that really complement each other well by having a good gunfighter and a good specialist.
Yeah, and they also benefit from something that helps really all the all the Haqqislamite factions, with a small exception in some QK units. The fact that all the Haqqislamite specialists have almost universally willpower 14 or higher, and that makes the Haqqislamite factions more efficient than most when it comes to scenario plays. When you are rolling for that important willpower roll to achieve whatever you're doing, whether it's hacking, especially if it's doctoring, if it's clicking a console on a mission, you have probably the best chances of success out of all the factions available to you as a player.
Yeah, and then of course what Haqislam is known about is that they're the faction with probably the best irregular troopers, uh, with wide selection of well excellent irregulars. And because of Saladin, they can include four or even five irregular troopers in a list and still make it work really well. And all of these things that we just mentioned, you can fit within a single list. So the like potential attack vectors are really diverse. It's usually really hard to defend against Haqq and also
Yeah, and the
because
fact
they
that most models pack rifles and light shotguns instead of the universal combi rifles makes most even light Haqqislam units extremely dangerous up close. They can punch way above their weight and thus trade up quite effectively.
yeah, and lastly, from the units at this point, I want to mention the Huntsakut, uh, which is an 18 point irregular trooper that has, well, who is a specialist, has rifle and light shotgun, and has deployable repeater with infiltration and camouflage. That really makes the Haqqislam hacking package really dangerous. But Haqqislam obviously has weaknesses as well. Uh, firstly, they don't have any like really strong units. Like they don't have Achilles or Atalanta or their tags are quite mediocre. Like Shakus is okay, but only okay. Uh, Magariba is, well, way too expensive if you compare it to other tags, like Gator, for example, which is basically a better tag that costs 10 points less. And because of not having like those excellent units that can like really deliver a punch and also take a punch, Haqislam is a bit vulnerable to having bad luck. They have a few like two wound units or units with no wound incapacitation, but they usually don't have a lot of armor. And if you miss some rolls, uh, things can go wrong pretty quickly. And there isn't any like a single unit usually who can carry the game. It more relies on the whole force working together, and then uh, like one unit doing something really good on one turn, and then next turn some other unit doing something else great.
I also feel that Haqqislam can run out of ways to achieve certain strategies because of the relative fragility of their squads. If the enemy is able to leverage their tools to attack the pieces that are the most important to what the Haqqislamite player is about to do, then they may have to alter their plans and go for plan B or C, because the pieces and the lists also tend to lack that strategic depth when it comes to being able to replicate certain tactical capabilities even after losing their like top tier guys.
Yeah, and also defensively, Haqislam can sometimes struggle a bit, or I think like defending with Haqislam is a bit tricky because they don't have any super strong defensive models. You can take Armand, who is in a good arrow piece in certain situations, but there are most factions have models that can like quite comfortably shoot Armand if they see him. They have, uh, for example, Nadir, that is pretty okay, but it's not like an arrow piece that can like really win you the game. So basically, I think Haqqislam defense uh, is mostly based on the fact that the enemy has to attack your like cheap irregular models first, or at least when Haqqislam manages to defend well, the enemy has to go through the irregulars first, and which is not too detrimental for the Haqqislam player, and then Haqqislam can then use their strengths on their own turn.
Yeah, exactly. But if the enemy finds a way to bypass this first line of expendable defenses, then they get to the juicy core inside, and that usually doesn't stand up too well to a dedicated attack.
Yeah, and also if Haqqislam, if they have to face a lot of units with high armor, like playing against, for example, Invincible Army, who also is quite durable against hacking, at least on their reactive turn, or face like really good tags like Marut, they can find it difficult to deal with those because they can't usually outgun the tags. And if the player with the tag is careful with it, they can usually stay outside of the hacking attempts of Haqqislam.
Yeah, and the faction also lacks any access to white noise, and I think also eclipse. So high-powered MSV pieces that are able to dominate long fire lanes can end up being problematic to deal with unless the Haqqislamite player is able to find another way than just trying to engage them the old-fashioned way by shooting at them.
Yeah, and of course Haqqislam is like more strong against some opponents, like they can handle Ariadna or Ariadna sectorials pretty well. But then when they have to face strong arrow PCs or lots of durable units, they might struggle. They're usually most dangerous on their first turn when they have all of their tools and attack vectors available. But then when you start to take those out, their options start to become a bit limited. And at the end of the game, it might be a bit difficult to come back from behind with Haqqislam because usually their units are not the most efficient. Like the irregulars, for example, are great at trading upwards, but they're not units that can like win you the game on last turn. And for that, you usually need units that are more efficient in how they spend their orders.
And despite the amazing amount of variety that the vanilla Haqqislam faction incorporates, and the fact that they are able to field an extremely diverse squad of troops as their strike force, I still feel that at least as of recording, what we see in tournaments seems to follow a quite strict pattern. The Haqqislam all stars list, or what you cookie cutter list, whatever you want to call it, is pretty standardized in the way it operates. There are pieces and modules that one can exchange for one another, but an experienced player facing vanilla Haqqislam probably can guess most of the stuff that they're going to face and guess most of the stuff that the Haqqislam player is about to try and pull off. So there aren't that many surprises awaiting an experienced player when facing them, I feel.
Yeah, and you can of course try a different build for list with Haqq but at least so far I haven't found out any way that is like better or even close as good as the like more standardized way to play Haqq at this point.
A little bird has told me that a famous Haqqislamite player is trying to build a more or less entirely camouflage and or out of table list. So we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, that will be interesting to see. And of course, like when you go into a tournament, you might sometimes take one of those lists that will totally surprise the opponent, and especially if you're playing against a really good player who thinks that they know what they're going up against, uh, like having something that totally surprises them but still works pretty well uh, can be effective. But where should we place Haqq I think definitely A tier. Uh, and I think Haqq is a faction that has a pretty good chance of winning against any other faction in the game. Uh, but the problem is in consistency. It is a bit difficult, or it can be more difficult with Haqq to win all 5 games in a tournament and avoid
Yeah, they
those.
can
Like,
be quite unforgiving when things start going wrong
yeah,
real bad. So how would you feel about placing them between Ariadna and Cosmoflot?
that's exactly my idea as well. So let's place them there. Any last words for Vanilla Haqq or shall we move on to Hassassin?
I think we can move to Hassassin Bahram because we are going to be throwing some Vanilla Haqqislam references when talking about them, no doubt.
Yeah, so I think I mean not Vanilla Haqq Hassassin Bahram is one of the factions that were hurt the most in the Fire Team update. They
For sure.
they were maybe even an A-tier faction before that. They still have mostly access to the same links, but losing those Fire Team bonuses really did hurt them because they had like quite versatile links already before the update. And now their link options actually might have gotten slightly worse now because Asaviras are now only wild cards. They cannot, for example, make Asavira duos anymore.
Yeah, and somehow I get the feeling that from my experience that the um, assassin units that form the fire teams don't act as much of much as force multipliers to one another than in some other sectorials. So you can form those fire teams. They will usually end up being so-called non-pure fire teams, which limits the amount of bonuses you can get. But at the same time, the higher availability of many of the units that the assassins have access to are also the types of units I feel that offer often diminishing returns when you start including multiples of them. You can, if you want to field 2 impersonators in vanilla Haqqislam by taking a FIDE and Al-Jabel. So having access to several FIDEs in Hassassin's isn't all that unique in and of itself. And if you are spamming something like nadirs that are in hidden deployment, well, then you are suffering from the lack of orders thereof. So I find the current position of Hassassin Bahram to be a bit problematic because the faction isn't carried by strong fire teams and availability of certain units isn't enough, I feel, to make good for what they lose by being a sectorial.
Yeah, and also some of the AVAs aren't even better than in vanilla Haqislam. For example, vAriads are still AVA 2 only, which a bit of a shame for Hassassin because they are great units.
Then
I
again, when using pictures, the burst 2 is really big. So I feel that parades are one of those things that really do get the necessary power up from the fire teams. But shackling your Asavira to a fire team to get +1 burst and at the most +1 ballistic skill and sixth sense, that isn't necessarily as good.
Yeah, like if you look at the things that are better in Hassassin than in vanilla Haqislam, definitely being able to link bodies and giving them pictures, their pictures +1 burst is one of those big things. You mentioned the ABA2 of Fides. I think that is still uh, like the returns diminish a little when you take another Fide, but Fides are so strong that I think it's still a really good option, at least as an option to have to take 2 Fides. And you usually, I think you don't want to take Al Jabel because it's like too expensive for what it brings. It's usually like very limited situations where Al Jabel is significantly better than normal Fide. Uh, but the Assassins now get access to McMurrow, which is great. I mean, they have a lot of good irregulars already, like Mutavias and Delamis, but McMurrow brings some like extra durability and danger to Assassin list.
And I personally also really like Pandora as an addition to Assassins. That's quite a versatile piece right there.
Yeah, Pandora is also great. It's not linkable in Assassins like it is in Steel Phalanx, but also just by herself, she is uh, pretty good. Uh,
So do I hear a low beat here
Not
coming
low.
then?
I think high B tier still. Like they are still strong. Uh, like losing those fire team bonuses doesn't destroy the faction, even though they just lose basically 2 points of ballistic skill. So I would probably place them behind White Banner, but in front of Invincible Army.
Yeah, I can live with that. That's the neighborhood mid BE that I would be comfortable putting them at. We are getting into splitting hairs territory pretty quickly down there, so let's just place them there and be content with that.
Yeah, and also as a last addition to like what is better in Assassin, is also same with all uh, Haqqislam sectorials is that they have then access to the Gulam NCO, or it makes sense to take the Gulam NCO with the smoke grenade launcher and also normal grenade launcher for the link. And yeah, their links are not the most optimal. Like mixing bodies with Asaviras is not the best thing in the world, but their links are still like pretty nice and they have a lot of flexibility in forming the links. But okay,
Yeah, I feel there's a lot of value in just deciding not to try and build pure fire teams, but accepting the fact that okay, I'm not going to get the full bonuses. What can I do with this? Because that also frees you up to form maybe 2 teams of 3 or a team of 3 and 4, and it gives you more flexibility that way. So that's not a damning thing to have is unpure fire teams, as we are going to talk about soon when we talk about Qapu Khalqi, but it's something that counts against them for sure.
yeah, and they also have AVA2 Rafiqs, which is great. But okay, let's move on to Qapu Khalqi, and this is the faction that 6 months ago I thought was low C tier, but then you changed my mind, and you probably changed your own mind as well. And uh, at least what I've seen in Discord, you have changed a few other minds as well. So go ahead, you can tell us about Qapu Khalqi.
Yeah, I was basically dared into playing them about 6 or 7 months ago. Some people in our domestic Discord were talking about how they were unplayable and how they needed a redesign and stuff like this. And I heard a challenge in those critiques and accepted the challenge. And I played them now for a bit over half a year now, quite intensively. And I have come around to thinking that they are an excellent faction, not A tier, but an excellent faction nonetheless. Um, One of the reasons that they are so damn good is the fact that, as I have been quite vocal about, the current environment, the current meta does give the possibility of leveraging guided missile strikes when combined with certain models to a punch way above what can be achieved any other way. It's not an unbeatable strategy, it's not an unfailable strategy, but it is a very powerful strategy to employ. And Qapu Khalqi can form fire teams of Druze, which have X-Visor pictures on their hacker profiles, and then they have a bunch of wildcards that they can then splice in order to make that fire team very versatile and cut down the amount of Druze you need to include. And once you get those pictures in place, then you can start, for example, doing coordinated hacks and the access to willpower 14 hackers in the form of gulams and uh, more powerful or more sturdy hackers like Mobile Brigada hacker with its Tinbot -6 really gives Qapu Khalqi a really extremely solid info war. Even their tag, one of their tags, Iguana, is poised to increase their hacking threat. So they are really good at info war. Also, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Azrael in a Harris is probably the highest damage ceiling unit in the entire game, at least when fighting against targets with no total immunity. Since they are firing either in active turn, they're firing practically 4 DA shots of continuous damage with +1 damage to their BS attacks. So it's AP, DA, and or no, just DA and plus damage and everything. Anyway, what that gets you is a unit that can basically kill almost anything with a single hit, and that also translates into the reactive. And while many people have criticized the Azrael for its somewhat mediocre BS of 13, the upside of what happens if you hit is so huge that most enemies, unless they have the set total immunity, can't engage it without the fear of getting totally blown out of the table. It only needs that one hit and you may be gone. And then beyond that, they have excellent doctors, they have NCO wildcards in sec bands. Champasans are solid MSV troops. They have yuans in in spades. So they are really an excellent all-rounded faction, I feel.
And did you also mention that they have AVA3 of Al Havas, and also they get Beast Hunter, so they can have also a pretty good camo game. Uh,
Yes, I didn't mention that they can spam camo pretty nice. I really like the Al Hawa sniper, which is a mine layer profile. It can take granted BS11, but still pot shots from tops of buildings that people don't expect to be fired from by a long-range weapon. They can place mines as they come, and then when you throw in a smattering of of camo tokens in the midfield, and then you have all that hacking, and then you have all that heavy firepower from the Azrael and so forth. That's a tough nut to crack for most factions.
Yeah, so basically they could have 5 camouflage markers in a game table that are totally different, and if you deploy them well, it's hard for the opponent to know which kind of a threat is under each of those markers.
Yes, and they're one of those factions that have a unit that has both the hacker and the forward observer profile, and that makes the life of the opponent really difficult, because when a camouflage marker such as that is moving, regardless of what faction that is part of, the enemy has to wait, or the opponent has to weigh whether they can risk a discover, which is necessary often for stopping a hacker from getting too close, but at the same time, if it's a forward observer, it will then reveal and take an unopposed forward observe, so, and the vice versa. So the Al-Hawas are really a great unit, and getting several of them is quite useful.
Yeah, so basically, whenever a camouflage marker is coming forward, and it might be a forward observer, you can't really risk to take a discover with anything expensive, because then it might just forward observe that expensive unit, and then missiles are raining down. You mentioned the Jews that has been like an essential part of your Qapu Khalqi lists. What makes them stronger, or what makes Qapu Khalqi stronger because of Jews when you compare that to actual Jews faction or Ikari that also has access to Jews Harris fire teams?
Well, I'd argue that QK is by far more diverse and dangerous a faction than Ikari Company or the Trues themselves. And like I said, you can spam cheap 16-point willpower 14 Gulam hackers if you are looking to make extensive use of the pitchers fired by the Trues. So there's that. And also, I feel that the Trues slot in really nicely into the Qapu Khalqi fire team makeup, because they are, as hackers, they are veterans, so that makes them a bit more difficult to counter on the hacking front. They carry viral pistols with X visors and +1 damage, so they are natural enemies of units like bears and Cameronians and stuff like that can be dangerous in against a force that's not prepared to take them on. And then you can add some other units to the fire team, like for example Odalisque for close range support. So you can really build your fire team to what you need. And I feel that Ikari and Trues can't do that at the same level, nor can they offer as wide a variety of excellent threat vectors as QK can. So, and they QK gets those willpower 14 specialists in spades. So I don't know what to tell you. They're a great faction, I feel.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So where would you place UK in the
I'd
list?
argue from what we have right now, I would place them at the top of B.
Even better than Vanilla Pano.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah, I would argue Vanilla Pano might be stronger than UK, but since
I
you've
think
been
the hacking game is so far above anything that Pano can achieve, and at the same time QK has plenty of access to smoke, which Pano does not. And Azrael is a great equalizer when it comes to firefights against even Pano tags or anything. So, but it's your show, mate.
well, in this case, I trust your experience with UK. I have never played with UK myself. I have played it against it only once when it was against you, and I played with Vanilla Haqislam, and that was a really difficult game for me. Even though I eventually like was quite lucky in the game, I haven't had that much trouble with Vanilla Haqislam in a long time. So I trust you on this, and let's place UK in front of Vanilla Pano in the top of B tier.
And don't tell them that, but this will make sure that we get a lot of comments on the video.
Yeah, few people might want to comment this, but Yeah, let them, and then let them challenge Grotnib to play against them with QK. I think that's usually the best way to change people's mind is to play against them with a faction that they think is really bad and show them that it's not. Okay, next we have Ramah Taskforce, and well, you have a blog about Ramah, so I'll let you take this one as well.
Okay, I'll try to keep this brief because I have just talked so much about QK. Ramah Task Force is, I think, a very well designed sectorial. It isn't over the top in almost any way, but it's a well rounded and strong elite sectorial. And elite means that it has little access to uh, warbands and irregular troops, but it can construct versatile and extremely capable, aggressive, fast-moving fire teams or strike teams altogether. If I were to critique UK for something, they do feel a bit slow when compared, for example, to Ramah Task Force. Ramah can take a hit as well in some regards. They don't have usually that many units with high armor, but then again, the super soldiers tend to have high physique, a lot of NWI and other survival skills. Carmen and Batard are freaking amazing. Having access to double Rafiks that can fire team also with a bunch of units is really good. They have nice access to smoke thanks to the said Gulam NCO. They can also build surprisingly good paint terrain fire teams of Janissaries and hot leg Janissaries. And usually, when you talk about Rama, people instantly think of the Zayedans, which offer you basically a BS-18 solution when plugged into a Gulam core, and that missile launcher is really scary. I personally prefer Azrael to Zayadan because the Azrael can survive a bad hit and still keep walking. And it's also way more dangerous on the active turn than, for example, the Zayadan missile launcher who was stuck at burst 2. But anyway, rolling 2 dice on 18 against most stuff and planting a missile on them if they lose that face to face does complicate many people's plans a lot. Obviously, you can bypass them with smoke. Roma can struggle against, especially against pitcher play, but their midboard has become stronger. They have already had Tuaregs, which are amazing skirmishers. I would argue that maybe one of the best hidden deployed skirmishers in the game. They also have had Nahabs from before, and now they also have Beast Hunters, and they can even bring a Sundukput. So I feel that they are a good all-rounded faction, not top tier, but if you dedicate yourself to them, you can get some great results out of them, I feel.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I think that's pretty comprehensive and short analysis of Ramah Task Force. And maybe I could add that they can actually field a pretty good amount of orders into a list. I remember like playing against you once when you had 15 orders in your first group and still had a 5 order second group in your list by using all those tactical awareness orders of Rafiks and Shakus and also the NCO order of the Gulam and then Namur as well. So that kind of list can really create a pretty strong alpha strike as well, even though they don't have like typical alpha strike units.
Yeah, they aren't one of those factions like the military orders that easily ends up starved for orders. They can build a really fun list that includes 15 orders and then NCO and a few tacker wares also. So that's really nice. And I also feel that they, as a force, while their tip isn't as wide when it comes to their tactical capabilities as, for example, with Vanilla Haqqislam, they don't have as many approaches to attacking as Vanilla Haqqislam does. They do tend to build quite a lot more redundancy into their lists. So if you lose something, that doesn't usually mean that you can't achieve what you were about to do, because many of the super soldiers can shoot, they can fight in melee, most of them are specialists of some kind, so you can easily just keep going with the plan you had, just switching the piece that you're going to use to achieve it. So in that way, they are also a nice faction to play.
Yeah, I think that's also a really good point to having that versatility of having well the same models being both fighters and specialists, and this is something that well some factions in particular struggle at. They have really strong units, but then they have to have like totally different units who do the button pushing or other like mission related stuff.
Yes, this is something, if we take a little peek into the future, that has really hit me when I have been playing JSA in the past year also. That how automatic it is with Ramah, that you're always bringing basically willpower 14 or 15 specialists forward as you're attacking. And then when you play a faction that has to dedicate resources to bring bad specialists to the front once the fighters get their job done, that's quite a challenge for your game plan. At least for me, it has been.
Yeah, and it's the same issue is also true for Hikari, maybe even worse than JSA. That when you have to, or you can't take all the models you want into a list because you also have to include some specialists, but you don't really want to spend any orders on those specialists because they are not that great as a models. And then you have to divide your orders for the models that fight and the models that complete the mission. And,
Yeah, for sure. And then
and
if you're playing Rama, just put a Namor Spitfire into a Harris with a Kulam NCO. The NCO moves the Namor forward. Then you get the Spitfire stuff with your total immune BS-13Bs. Smoke something that you don't want to shoot, kill it in melee, and then push a button. Explode your recharges to gain a classified. You're a elite or veteran. Do that classified also. So, amazing.
yeah, that's
So I'd argue
efficient.
putting Rama somewhere in the high Bs also, above Assassins for sure.
Yeah, I think they are also in the high B tier, better than Invincible Army, somewhere close to Hassassin, I think. Yeah, I think I would be willing to place them like between Assassins and White Batter. Is that
Yeah,
something
that
you agree
works for
with?
me.
All right, let's place them there.
Okay, and then another topic that's really guaranteed to get us some some comments and some talking. Talk about Nomads to me, Panda.
So, what are the Nomads? Yeah, they are probably the most discussed faction in Infinity, or have been for the past couple of years, maybe. Uh, maybe with one of the Nomads, we should start with the like meta nomad list that has been going around for at least 2 years, probably even more, probably almost since the beginning of N4, which has uh, a tag. Usually Sally could be also Gator. Then they have Überfall Commando, Puppet Bots, Jazz, Heckler with Fast Panda, the Missile Bot, of course, a couple of Morans.
Moderator and a decoy for the
Yeah,
lieutenant, and
yeah, so it is obviously a really strong list. Like they have so many really good attack pieces, and like in addition to those models that I listed, there's still like something around like 50 points left that you can take, like the TR bot or Liberto or stuff like that. And they can attack in so many ways. They're also defensively pretty strong. Like just like going around Morans is difficult. Uh, and if you don't have some like really specific tools like impersonators, it's usually pretty hard to like engage that nomad list. But basically, there's like a collection of really excellent units that are all together in the same list. Um, and most of those like units that I just listed are better than most other factions even have in their roster. Uh,
yeah, and they are in many ways also units that are extremely difficult to counter, especially cost efficiently. If you look at something like the Uberfall Commando, when you flood an area of the table with them, it's really difficult to dig them out usually. And the fact that the Chimera has Eclipse grenades means that you can't even use models with MSV to try and stop them. So that's quite powerful.
Yeah, and the Heckler with Fast Panda can deliver repeater in the enemy deployment zone uh, in enemies and even in missions that have an exclusion zone because they only have forward deployment 4 and they can put the repeater 8 inches from them. And basically the only way to stop that repeater coming into your deployment zone is having a mine layer or a mine in the right place. And even then, they can use a Morlock to explode that mine first and then uh, take the heckler there. There are two tag options. Zali and Gator are both really excellent. Uh, some of the best tags in the game. As good as any tag basically that Pano has, which is supposed to be the tag faction. And they can also offer a lot better support for the tags than Pano. They can protect it from hacking with their own hackers. They can also have an engineer, like, well, usually it's going to be a monstrucker, but they could also take a fiddler as well if they want.
Or clockmaker, or isn't there a character that's both a hacker and an engineer? So
Yeah,
you can really,
there's Zoe as well, who is hacker and
yeah.
engineer.
So you can really do stuff like that. And you mentioned the heckler play. Well, even if that somehow isn't usable or it fails, then you have access to pictures also. With vanilla nomads in this list, Chaz has pictures. I think um, Morlocks offer you cheap, effective warbands that can throw smoke and also kill stuff at close range. Um, they Nomads are one of the factions that has access to Hacking Device Plus, which effectively means that they have access to white noise. So that's yet another tool that they have access to. So they seem to have quite almost everything really.
Yeah, and already based on this like meta nomad list, uh, I'm willing to place Nomads really close to S tier. But there has been also, because the list has been going around so long, there's been a lot of critique against this list that when you remove a single important model from the list, the whole list can start to unravel. So if you remove
I,
Jazz from that list, the missile bot becomes close to useless. Morans become close to useless.
but I have a problem with this because I feel that while true, um, being um, being a faction that relies on powerful yet cheapish one wound models to do the heavy lifting isn't a bad weakness to have in current state of the game because of the defense that the nomads are able to mount and because of the hacking superiority that they usually enjoy. Enemies usually have really hard time leveraging that so-called weakness of being reliant on one wound troopers that if they die they make other elements of the list more or less useless. That's after all the life of every faction in the game. If you lose stuff, then other stuff starts to be less important. So I have often found myself spec firing grenades at these one wound models, and that's in no way a reliable tactic, even if that makes the nomad player scared. So I don't buy that being a credible weakness in the meta as it is right now.
Yeah, it's somewhat of a weakness, I think, but only against, or at least mostly only against some factions that can have those tools that can remove, uh, like Jazz or the missile, for example, having an impersonator or like
Or having X visor pictures in a fire team that can
yeah,
then do that. That's how my QK has been dealing with nomads the past few months.
yeah. But I think the biggest problem with that critique is that it's only like addressing the meta nomad list, which is by no means the only list that nomads can bring, or the only like really good list. And another critique that is sometimes like put against nomads is that they struggle against Ariadna, and like against both of these critiques. Uh, like for example, Veran from Latvia, who has won at least a couple of satellites this season already with Nomads, uh, plays quite different kind of lists. A list with which doesn't have the tag, but it has two hecklers, which are great against Ariadna. The list has also Zoe, which has become quite popular this season because Pywell has the tactical awareness, marksmanship, and already like bringing Zoe into the list. You have another hacker. You have also an engineer who can fix the missile bot or the tag if you still have the tag. Then the Veran's list also has Armand, and it has an intruder, and that isn't necessarily like the most optimal nomad list against every faction, but if you're facing against Ariadna, suddenly that list becomes really strong against Ariadna. And
And that especially in a tournament environment is really important, being able to wield two powerful yet different lists. And the second list doesn't have to be as powerful as the first one if it can threaten the opponent in a way that's unexpected, or can somehow take advantage of something that the other list cannot, because the opponent still has to, especially in the case of the vanilla nomads, rely or take into account the fact that they might be encountering the standard zoo list, and then they have to prepare for that, and then they face something else.
yeah, and like basically the critique that people use against nomads that it's not an S tier, it's only an A tier faction. Uh, it usually never addresses the versatility that nomads have, that they can actually build a lot of different kind of lists, not only the meta lists that you see.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And I think they still have a lot of also like unrealized potential because they have a huge, like a lot of versatility in their roster. And they can, for example, if you don't want to play with one wound models, you can take two tags into the list, and they still have enough of cheap troopers that they can make that list work pretty well. And taking two really strong hackers is not a problem for nomads at all. And usually, like they can easily also build a list that where the models really support each other really well. Like I also already mentioned Zoe, which is a good example of being both hacker and an engineer.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you have just said. So there's no reason in my mind to not place them in S tier. They're not unbeatable, but they are one of the most dangerous factions that you can face on tournament table for sure.
Yeah, and I think the latest Bakunin update didn't really affect the Nomads a lot, but they got a couple of new models which aren't as good as the old models that they have, but also bring additional versatility in their list, especially Stigmata. Uh, I haven't tried it in any Nomad lists that I've tried to build, but it could be potentially okay there. So yeah, let's
Yeah,
put.
I think it's safe to assume that at least something in Bakunin is going to trickle down into the vanilla nomad lists as potentially usable once people figure out Bakunin more.
Yeah, although Nomads didn't get everything that Bakunin had, but still some of their models and changes went to one of the Nomads as well. Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the Nomads are an S tier faction, so let's put them there. Then next we have Corregidor. Uh, I think this is a bit of a tricky faction. They have a lot of strengths, but many of like what they have is already something that you can take in one of the Nomads. So they don't have a lot that vanilla nomads don't already have,
Yeah, and
at
they
least
are
on the
they're one
surface.
of those factions that before the fire team change, I would have said that they almost live and die by their fire teams. And if you are wanting to play Nomads and you want to play diverse, powerful fire teams, then it's Corregidor. But now that they can form like pure fire teams like they used to, with all the models, um, that makes a whole lot of difference for them.
Yeah, they have quite bad. pure fire team options. They could take like full evader core, which isn't necessarily bad. They're pretty good and cheap heavy infantry troopers uh, that have access to specialists and also Teen Bot having some couple of good guns, or they could take the correctional fire team. The problem there is that they don't have any good weapons for that correctional fire team, although Diablos look pretty okay. Uh, One interesting fire team that they can take is having Harris of two geckos and maybe Wildcat engineer there. It is something that I think could be good, at least in certain matchup, and something that I really want to try. One of
Yeah,
their
and it's for sure something that's cool and different. My problem with that is that I'm afraid that that gives you a tactical capability that you can replicate in other ways also. But I haven't played uh, into that so much that I could really say for sure.
Yeah, and like you could also just instead of two geckos, you could take a gator and well add an engineer with gator as well if you want, and it could be like as good as or even better than the two gecko.
Yeah, and they still have access to things like strong hacking. They, I think bandits are quite decent skirmishers and everything. So if you are a new player looking to play Corregidor, don't be discouraged. They also have access to McMorrow. That's nice. So there are certainly things there. I usually try not to say what I would hope CP would do, but on this instance I can't resist the temptation and say that at least from what I understand from the backstory, isn't Corregidor the most militarized of the nomad ships, and aren't they the ones who give their soldiers or rent their soldiers out as mercenaries the most? So I think that Morad style faction where everything goes with everything in fire teams would be really thematic for this faction, and I think it would then also legitimize its existence, give a reason to play Corregidor because everything fire teams up with everything with full bonuses.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like being a bit more Morat-like would really serve Corregidor. Yeah, you mentioned McMorrow. It's also one of the things that one of Nomads don't have. Another is being able to link jazz and having a Sixth Sense hacker. Although I don't think it's like that of a huge deal, like compared to other ways how vanilla Nomad hacking is better. Uh,
And they
and
do struggle with their lieutenant
yeah,
options.
that's
It's not
the
as bad as with military orders, but still having to choose between a mobile brigada, which is good but expensive, or
and
a one
also obvious.
SWC standard trooper is pretty tough.
Yeah, I think at least in the current like hacking meta, having a mobile brigade lieutenant, it doesn't really work because it is an obvious lieutenant. You would never take the model if it wasn't a lieutenant, and it's so easy to isolate then.
Well, not easy if it's in a fire team. Then you probably enjoy Sixth Sense. It has a teen bot -6 in that fire team, but yeah, it's not great.
Well, yeah, if it takes the team bot -6, then it starts to be really expensive because then you need the mobile brigade hacker there in as well. But having to pay that one SWC for the Alguacil lieutenant really makes the list building a lot harder, especially if you want then to have at least one hacker in the list, have two Morans, and having uh, the missile bot that's already how many SWCs? Like three and a half. Did I
Yeah,
calculate
that's
correctly?
playing one SWC down in this current meta is really punishing because if you take the basic guided package, that's already 2 SWC, and big guns are usually 1.5 per, and you want something else also, usually redundancy in hacking and stuff like that. So you quickly run out of that if you're only working with 5 SWC. Obviously, you could try to mitigate the problem somewhat by having a mobile brigada lieutenant and using evaders, which are quite excellent. They have tinbot -3s on many profiles. But at the end of the day, this does feel like an unnecessary complication to their list building process, and one that isn't warranted. If we were talking about something like Nomads, and we were talking Nomads will have to have a one SWC lieutenant or an obvious mobile brigada lieutenant in vanilla, then I would be like, yeah, that's a trade-off for a powerful faction. But I don't feel that Corregidor needs this kind of trouble for their power balance to be okay.
Yeah, and like having to pay 30 points for a lieutenant that doesn't really want to do anything except being a lieutenant is also a huge tax that makes the rest of the list worse. And I just actually calculated it's 4 SWCs if you want to take Algosi Lieutenant, 2 more rounds, 1 hacker, and the missile bot. So you're not going to
Yeah,
have
so it's
many
basically
big
one
guns
one big
after
one
that.
big gun and you're done.
Yeah. Uh, okay, where would you place Corregidor?
I would probably put it in the low Bs. I don't think it's seaworthy with haha, here the pun there. I don't think it's worthy of going into C because it does have all the fundamentals. It's just the list building that's the problem, I feel.
Yeah, maybe like they have a lot of strengths as well. A lot of their units are good. It's just like list building is a bit difficult and like having a unified list that works together is difficult with them. Uh, Maybe between Acontecimento and Svalorheima. Is that something you would agree?
Yeah, I can live with that. I could even put them above Acontecimento due to their access to smoke, but it's fine. Let's put it there. That's a nice place.
Okay, so then we can move on to Bakunin, which just got updated this spring. And I think the update made them like they already were a strong faction. I think they were probably an A-tier faction before, but this update made them even stronger. And not necessarily because the new units are better than the old ones, but because they are totally different and at least almost as good. So,
And I think one important and powerful element of the update was the fact that many of the things that were already great didn't get touched basically at all. So, for example, the archetype of a list where you have this core of riot girls with Avicenna and Fiddler, they didn't change anything about that. So you just get basically new stuff on top of what was already good in the faction. So I feel that increases their power for sure.
yeah, like before, if you were playing as Bakunin, you pretty much knew what you were going to be up against. So that's the Riot Girl core. You probably have Zoe and Pywell, a moderator lieutenant with a decoy, 1 or 2 Uberfrog commandos, maybe some like offensive hacking game. But the lists were like quite similar to each other. Now you could be facing more than a 5 mimetism -6 models suddenly.
Yeah, with
So
aggressive picture play and something that requires a totally different type of approach from you as a player to face than what the standard Riot Girl Link style is forces you to do.
yeah, and also Brando got a lot better uh, because now it has no wounding capacitation and stealth immunity, or no, I mean immunity shock. I'm reading totally wrong things. Uh, and with boarding shotgun, and like even though you necessarily you don't necessarily want to take Brando in most of your lists, but the possibility of like having Brando forces your opponent to like prepare for it. And now like there starts to be just like way too many things to prepare for when you're against Bakunin in a tournament. And like
Yeah, yeah, you almost have to accept the fact that you are going to be somewhat off balance from the get-go, because you can't make a good guess on what you're going to face. Or you can obviously guess, but if you guess wrong, then you can be in some real trouble.
yeah, like if you're playing against the like observance list, which has a lot of mimetism, like you need MSVs for that, and you might pick the list that has MSVs. But then if you're against riot curls, those MSVs don't really do anything at all, and you just wasted a huge amount of like uh, points and like capabilities into those MSVs. But then again, if you don't have,
Or you need to start and build lists with factions that can take on multiple challenges with the same models. Let's say a faction with orange shoulder patches, maybe.
yeah, yeah, that's also one way. But
That was
yeah,
a paid commercial for my blog. Go and see that.
yeah, I will link it into the like show description. Uh, but yeah, like in the tournament when you're up against Bakunin, it's usually like it's can be really difficult to know what you're up against. Really difficult to know which list you should play because you don't know what your opponent is going to bring. Also, their new tag Stigmata, even though it's not necessarily the best tag in Nomads, it can be quite tricky to play against. Like because it's a hacker, it has heavy flamethrowers, and it can like create a lot of like annoying forks with that combination.
Yeah, and also I like it very much from a list building perspective, because it does give you a somewhat sturdy, well, I'll say sturdy, even though it's a light tag. Basically, it's a sturdy gun platform and a hacker, and it can even kick somebody to death in melee with its electrified feet. So it's a cool piece from list building perspective, and you only pay 1.5 SWC for it in Bakunin. So you're basically getting a discount there, because you usually pay that 1.5 for the heavy rocket launcher, but now you get also the hacking device in that. So I really like it from that point of view. That said, when we are evaluating, and as we are evaluating Bakunin right now, we also have to accept the fact that we don't have as much experience playing into, with, or seeing others play with or against Bakunin. So this is more speculative than many of our other takes so far.
Yeah, but that only like concerns the like uh, new stuff
Yeah,
after
the
the
new
update.
stuff. Yeah,
We have
yeah,
played a
for
lot
sure.
against
Yeah,
the like old version of Bakunin, which already was a super strong faction.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
So A or S, is that the question then?
I think I would still place it probably in A tier. Although, like, I was just wondering what are the weaknesses of Bakunin, and it's a bit difficult to like find any. Maybe there are like their like hacking game is a bit more vulnerable to like enemy hackers or other like offensive strikes if they
Yeah, and I
unless
do feel that the standard Riot Girl list is a bit top heavy, so you can play around them, and you can do the stuff that you usually do against pain trains, even though the MSV and all the stuff makes them better than most pain trains. And I have a sneaking suspicion that the observancy side is more prone to falling against sustained close range assaults. So there might be some significant weaknesses there, but we don't really know yet at this time.
yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point. So against the like Riot Curl core list, you can more easily like uh, just destroy the other weak pieces in the opponent's list. And because the Riot Girls, they don't have any additional tactical awareness or other orders, uh, and they are also quite slow. So that will start to hurt them if they don't have enough orders. And that also can
Yeah,
be true
and
for,
while they are pound for pound amazing pieces, there aren't the alpha shooters in the game. There are things that can just engage them at range and force them to duck down or take casualties even.
yeah. And also the problem with all like strong core links is that if you kill one model of their, even though they have a doctor, but if you're able to like totally remove one of the models, they lose 2 points of ballistic skill, and then it becomes a lot easier target.
Yeah.
But anyway, I would place them at a, somewhere at the top of A tier. Do you think they are ahead or behind Vanilla Ariadna?
I would place them behind, but it's just my personal gut feeling at the moment. As I said, I don't have enough experience playing against the observancy side of them to feel strongly about this.
Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. So between Ariadna and Haqislam.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like currently they are probably stronger than Haqislam. They are like more durable, more resistant against bad luck, and so on.
Yeah, I can get behind that. They, after all, the Riot Girl fire team is something gives you tactical capabilities that Haqqislam just cannot replicate in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and they can also replicate some of or like many of the Haqislam like capabilities with aggressive repeater game and Uberfall commandos that they can take through.
yes, exactly.
Okay, then lastly from Nomads, Tunguska.
Oh, this is a bit tough one, I feel. What are your
Uh,
thoughts on Tunguska?
yeah, I have played some games with Tunguska and also observed some other games. Uh, yeah, they are clearly not as strong as Bakunin. They are like somewhere pretty close to Corregidor, I think. Uh, again, if you compare like Tunguska to one of the Nomads, the like bonus that they have is that they can take Grenzers in a link team, and of course they were a bit hurt from the fire team update now that they lost the like link bonuses. But still, like having a Granger even in a non-pure link is pretty good. And then you can take, for example, Securitate uh, paramedic there, take one or two uh, interventor hackers into that, and then you have a four-man pretty strong fire team. Also, like especially in the ITS season 14, they can make a really nice fire team with the Vostok, Fiddler, and the FO bot,
Yeah,
which
for
is
sure.
also which is something that the Vanilla Nomads cannot take either. And they, of course, they have strong hacking with the interventors. They have hecklers. They have Sally, although you might find it hard to afford Sally in a Tunguska list because they lack cheap orders. I think they have AVA2 motorized bounty hunters that can probably even duo, if I'm not totally mistaken. Yeah, they can
I
still.
have this weird feeling about Tunguska that they are somehow they feel like the red-haired step brother or sister of Rama. They seem like a elite sectorial like Rama, but somehow the list building with them doesn't fall into place just like it does with Rama. They have so many cool profiles, and they do get some stuff that other sectorials don't get with nomads, like for example Perseus. But at the same time, building a list that's able to incorporate enough varied threat vectors and also enough redundancy isn't all that easy with them. But I
Yeah,
also feel that they may be a faction that has some unrealized potential because they aren't that popular in the current tournament meta.
yeah, I think you might be right there. And I just checked, they actually have AVA3 of motorized bounty hunters that can also form a Harris. It's another question, why would you do that? But it is an option. But yeah, I do agree, and actually they might like have even stronger that nomad problem when you remove like some models from there. Them they start to like lose a lot of their capabilities.
Yeah, and I feel that they are also an example why the vanilla nomads are so powerful, because I feel that Tunguska lacks that ablative defense that the vanilla nomads are able to set up, and that makes it easier to victimize those important pieces in Tunguska. So,
Yeah,
and also the fact that they present the opponent um, with fewer threat vectors to counter, that also I feel makes it easier playing against them, I'm afraid.
yeah, I like your like comparison to Ramah. They share a lot of similarities, but yeah, I think even though hacking game is a lot stronger in Tunguska, in other areas they are like tactically less versatile. They have like less options how to attack, less options how to defend. They don't really have war bands at all. So where
And they
would
have a limited access to smoke also. Only Zond Nautica and Perseus get smoke.
yeah, so they're
So
also somewhat like close to Pano in that sense. Uh,
or JSA maybe, but yeah.
yeah, so they're a faction that like because of their good units and good tools can be really dangerous, but to consistently win with Tunguska uh, can can be difficult, I think.
Yeah, at least in a tournament environment. So where would you be putting them?
I think I would place them slightly behind Corregidor, maybe just behind Corregidor and ahead of Svalarheima, possibly.
Uh, I could place them even further back, maybe, because as we talked about, they even don't have that great an access to smoke. I could go even as far as place them behind Varuna.
Yeah, I think I can leave with that. So there might be some like unrealized potential, and
Yeah,
and
for
like
sure.
and I guess like if at a tournament I'm facing Tunguska, I might be like more scared of Tunguska than Svalarheima or Varuna. Uh, but when you take like a longer view that you need to have a versatile list that can win a tournament, uh, like doing that with Tunguska could be more difficult than with Svalarheima or Varuna. So yeah, I'm satisfied with that ranking for them.
But they seem like just the type of faction that if the reinforcements rule will allow them to borrow something from someplace else, that could really force multiply them in the future. So interested to see how the future changes will affect them.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the new rules and like maybe doing this list again after we have analyzed the changes and see how the power rankings will change. But I think this will conclude the second part of our series. Next time we will try to go over the rest of the factions. Let us know in the comments whether you agree or not with our takes, and let us know where we are wrong or where you think that we are wrong. So see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Bye.